He came to Thailand to do that negotiation, but the details are not really clear. The next person who was recruited, as far as I know, was Colonel Laseng Lam. And people know who this guy is? Some people must know, eh? So he was one of General Van Pau's right-hand man in Laos. He was also after 1975, and he was sort of the head of the Baird clan in Madison. He just died last year. A very important Hmong leader in the United States, and politically aligned heavily with General Van Pau. So he was invited to go out in about 1984, and I interviewed him before he died, but I also talked to his son, Jong Jae, about this, and he confirmed that, yeah, he was asked by Thai officials to go out to try to convince the Hmong CPT to give up, near Khao Kaw, also Phu Hin Mong Gla, another important CPT base, and finally Phu Soi Dao, which was the last place where the Hmong CPT were combined. That's right on the border with Laos. And so he went out there to try and talk with them. He apparently met with Pawit, who was one of the Hmong CPT leaders. But by all accounts, he was unsuccessful. They didn't listen to him. Well, they didn't believe him at that time. So he wasn't able to get people to give up. Then later on, this is a bit of a mistake. It should be Chong Tua Pa, Major Chong Tua Pa was then called by the Thais again to meet with Pawit, the head of the Hmong CPT, and then another guy named Sao Shong, who's now in Michigan. He also came and met with Pawit. So the Thais were pulling all kinds of Hmong people, prominent Hmong people, to go out there and try to talk to the Hmong CPT to try to get them to give up. And then he was also not successful. So there was a number of attempts. Do you know Yang Eng, right? Paul was talking about him earlier, the guy that's part of the radio lab controversy. Well, he was another person who they called upon, together with, and he lives in St. Oakland Park right now, and this Wang Bi, who was in North Carolina, very famous Hmong pilot who died just a few months ago. And they were together called upon by the Thai officials, both Yang Eng and Wang Bi. And Yang Eng gave me a very detailed account of this. He doesn't speak English, but he speaks Lao very well. And so he gave me the account in Lao, and because I speak Lao well. And so basically, it's pretty interesting. They went up there, and how this happened. So they were kind of brought up by some Thai soldiers, and then they were let go. So go in there, they're over there. And then the Hmong went in by themselves. And they initially came across a village which had Hmong women and children there, but there were no soldiers. And they weren't armed, and so they showed up and they said, what's going on? And the women and children didn't know. And then some men showed up later, but without guns. They were sort of CPT soldiers. I guess the soldiers were in behind somewhere. And the Hmong CPT were afraid that they were surrounded by Thai soldiers, so they didn't try to attack these guys, Yang Eng and Wang Bi. And they spoke in Hmong mainly, but they said that they couldn't, they wouldn't say much. And actually, they asked, they said, well, we can't, we'll speak in Thai, because there was also some Thais listening in, because the Hmong and Thai were mixed up together. There was some Thai CPT, some Hmong CPT, so they actually spoke in Thai because they wanted everyone to understand. Because the Hmong could understand Thai, but the Thai couldn't understand Hmong, right? So that's kind of how that went. And then at that time, just to make it clear, initially they were all the CPT were supported by China. Later on, near the end of the CPT period, there was a split in the CPT because the Soviet Union and China had a split. And then when that happened, they tried to set up another Communist Party of Thailand that would support the Soviet Union and not support China. They called them the Green Stars, and the pro-Chinese were called the Red Stars. So they have the Red Stars and Green Star CPT. They were, at this point, by the time they met, they were all together because they were in a real bad state. They'd been militarily beaten. They didn't have many supplies. They were kind of at the end. They hadn't given up yet. And they met at a place called Hurm Stream, right near the border with, probably it was in Laos actually. And Wang Bi suggested that the Hmong CPT come into the refugee camps for going to third countries. So he actually suggested that these Thai Hmong come into refugee camps and then come to America to get them out of Thailand, to end the conflict, which is an interesting suggestion. And apparently, the Thais had already agreed to this. And they were going to say that they were from Laos, they were going to send the communists to the United States. So that would get rid of the problem. So that was interesting. And he said that, he said that Laos and Thailand were not Hmong countries. Better to go with General Power in the USA. That's what he was advocating. And but the two CPT that he talked to initially said, we can't say too much. We're not really at the high enough level to say much. We'll come back tomorrow with our leaders, and then you can talk to them. So they stayed the night there. They stayed overnight. And then the next day, about 8 in the morning, they showed up, and about 10 people came. 4 or 5 of them were Hmong, and only the Hmong spoke to them, but they spoke in Thai. The Thais observed what was going on. And everyone had new uniforms on, with big AK-47, shiny weapons, everything, because they wanted to show they were capable. They wanted to show they could still fight. They weren't a beaten force yet, so they were trying to make a bit of a show of it as well. And Wang Bi said the same thing as he did before. And then one of the main CPT leader was the Blia Yashong, was the main CPT leader who spoke with them. And he said that last year on the radio he had heard that some Hmong in Thailand had been sent back to Laos. This was a time where some of them were beginning to be repatriated to Laos. So he didn't really trust this thing. He said, well, if you're going to help us out here, like if we give ourselves in, aren't we going to just be sent over to Laos, and we're going to be sent some other place? Like, are we really going to end up in the U.S.? He was a bit skeptical. And then and he's got some good quotes here. Blia Yashong said, we fight the Thai government. In places where there is pressure being put on the people, that is where there is fighting. Everything is not the people's. The land and the forest is all the government's. They make protected forests everywhere. When there is equality, there will be an end to fighting. So this really shows that they felt that they were fighting against social injustices, right? And then Yang Eng replied, the motto of the Lao government is that it stands with the people for equality and unity, the equal rights and justice. They say that this is, they say this, but they don't do it. The things that they do, they don't say. That is the end of equality. And then he also said, during this period, the world isn't interested in supporting people who are attacking each other. The world motto is that everyone is their own bosses. And then they responded that his words were interesting, but not true. And then Blia Yashong said, I come from Thailand. I see people begging for food in every city. There are shoe shiners and vehicle washers. Who wants to be like that? And Yang Eng answered, your sayings are just empty words, which are beautiful to the eyes and ears. The people of China and Laos are many times poorer than in Thailand. I ask you to please change and give yourselves up to the people who can study together with you and don't go back to the forest. And Blia Yashong did not respond, according to Yang Eng. So this was kind of the exchange they were having between these two Hmong guys. And then Yang Eng told them that they were not there to force them, just to try to persuade them. Yang Eng put down his gun, but apparently Wang Bi was a bit more, he didn't want to put down his gun. He held his gun. And then finally the Hmong left, the CPT left. And then 2 months later, 54 people from Blia Yashong's group gave up at Bom Glau village. And Blia Yashong himself gave up some months later. They actually brought Yang Eng from the Ban Mi to go and take a look at these 54 who had given up and said, were any of these people the ones that you met when you were out in the forest? But none of them were. And also the guns that they gave up were just a few small guns for shooting birds. But what they saw when they were out there were AK-47s, M16s. The good guns they were still holding on to. So this was sort of the beginning when some of them were beginning to come in. So and then the second time he was asked to go again. And this was in February or March 1985. He went to the west side of the same mountain, Pu Soi Dao, about 1 kilometer from the Lao border, and he met with Pawit, who was another key Hmong CPT person who was interviewed in Yu Peng Chong's documentary. There's lots of stuff with Pawit in that documentary if you take a look at it. So he met them, and he met them at another stream, and he went with 4 Lao people from Saibuli province of Laos, 5 Hmong, and 1 Hmong who knew the area, kind of a Hmong Thai. And he first met a Hmong Bang in the forest who was out shooting birds, and they sort of surprised him, and then they asked him to go back and get his leaders to come out and talk to them. So they camped out the night, but they separated. They were afraid of attack, but they camped out. And then the next morning again, Pawit showed up, and they used a bird call to indicate that they were there. And then the 4 or 5 Hmong showed up. And then Yang Eng explained what he'd said to Leah Yasho, and then Pawit said, how can a Thai eat grass like a cow or buffalo? You know, clearly he wasn't convinced that the Thais were really going to be honor their promises. And then he says, and he said, tigers can't eat people like before because people are smarter now. And then apparently after that they had quite a good discussion and they were getting along okay. Pawit said that he didn't believe the others that had come before him. So the other Hmong Lao who had come before him had not been convincing to him. But he said if they had spoken sincerely like him, he would have believed. And then Pawit said that the Chinese had stopped helping them out. They only had leftovers. He said that he was at Khao Pa before, but was the last group from there who had fled over to Pusoi Dai. So Pawit did not give up at that time, but Yang Eng planned to meet him again. However, shortly afterwards, he went to the U.S. He was sent to the U.S., so he never went back again. So that was at the end of his encounter with the Hmong CPT. But after that, Colonel Lee Lau, who died a couple years ago in North Carolina, but actually was living in Thailand most of the time, and that's him in the middle there. He was another important resistance person in northern Thailand. He was the last one who brought in the very last Hmong out of the forest. And so he went up and met these Hmong, and apparently he convinced them to come down, contacted Pawit, and got Pawit to come down in 1986-87, which is sort of the end. And the Thais planned to actually, initially this was the last group up in the mountains of Pusoi Dai, and though the Thais actually had a plan that they were going to develop them there. They were going to do a bunch of development and let them stay up in the mountain. But the Hmong actually didn't believe the Thais, so they came right down to the foothills because they thought that they wanted them to stay up there. In fact, that was kind of a missed opportunity because they would have gotten a lot more development support if they'd stayed where they were. But they came down, and then they were put in Kek Noi, so they're all in Kek Noi now. And so basically, and then the very last Hmong leader, the very last CPT leader after everyone else had given up was a guy named Plea Lau. And Plea Lau didn't give up to Thai. He gave, and this happened to some other CPT as well. They went to Laos and they kind of integrated into society in Laos. And then oddly enough, he was killed in a freak motorcycle accident. He was run over by a motorcycle being driven by a foreigner. And I don't know how that happened, but there's a lot of suspicion that that was somehow a planned killing, but more than likely it was just an accident. But anyway, he was killed that way. So that's kind of the end of that. So in the end, what you can say is the Hmong have been heavily involved in supporting the CP in northern Thailand, fighting or defending against the CPT in Thailand, and helping the Thai government negotiate with the Hmong CPT. Some Hmong Lao and some Hmong Thai have also opposed the CPT, and that's what I've mainly been talking about in this presentation. And the Hmong have had a complex history in relation to the CPT, one that still needs to be written about, and there's still a lot more research to be done. But I think that this is important to understand that in some ways, the Hmong were kind of on both sides of this story, and it was a very complex issue that still needs to be researched more. So that's all for now. Thank you.
We have 25 minutes.
Good. That's what I was hoping. Yeah. So, questions, comments? There's probably lots of stuff I didn't mention.
Was the military operation coordinated by the Thai Paru?
No. The Thai Paru are the border patrol police. So they weren't that involved. It was mainly, they were somewhat involved in a few areas, but it was mainly the regular Thai army. So it was regular Thai army, and sort of they have a number of security organizations that were involved. And some of these groups were like supporting these same people to fight in Laos. And then they were using them to support them against the CPT as well. The other thing I didn't mention is also some of the Hmong and other refugees were also used to guard roads. So one of the biggest things was that Thai government was trying to build roads up to the area where the Hmong camps were, the CPT camps were. And so they had tried to get those roads through, but the problem is that the bulldozers would start going up and they get sniped. And they had to put actually big wooden houses around the top of the tractors to keep them from being shot. And then they got these Hmong and other refugees as kind of mercenaries to guard the roads to keep, because once they could build the road up, then they could get their conventional military stuff up there to fight them. The big guns that they could then bring in on their bases. So it was really battle about, the Hmong were trying to stop road building. They were like very opposed, the ones in the CPT. Yeah?
We see that the Thai government utilized citizenship as a way to get people on their side to fight among the CPT. Do we see, so apparently for example, the KMT in assuming they were once discriminated against and did not have citizenship, and the Thai government utilizing them on the incentive of citizenship, were there any structural change in the way that they treated other ethnic minorities?
I don't think the level of prejudice against the Chinese was like with the Hmong. There was much more prejudice against the Hmong than the Chinese. So I don't think the Chinese were faced with so much prejudice to begin with, but they were certainly isolated and they were seen as guests. They were not seen as citizens. And in fact, they themselves did not want to be citizens earlier. They had every intent of going back to China and fighting against the communist era and gaining back their country. But then they realized they couldn't really do that, and then they kind of were happy to become Thai citizens.
And did you mention before that there were Hmong in Thailand who fought? Okay, so you said there were Hmong in Thailand who fought against the Hmong CPT.
Well, they were more these village security groups, right?
Right.
Who walked around with guns, and they got into battles with other Hmong CPT at times. So there was some fighting, but what they found was, and actually the members of the KMT told me that they also brought some Hmong Thais with them. But what seemed to happen with the Hmong Thais is they would get close to the Hmong Lao bases, the Hmong Thai bases, CPT bases, and they would